A warm night in late spring of 2010, an intruder had gained entry to a small country home. They had climbed through a bathroom window located to the rear of the house. Found at the crime scene was creepy evidence that once inside, the intruder hid in the bath, just waiting for the right moment to attack. Police gradually gathered and pieced together evidence that painted a horrifying picture, which eventually led to the capture of the offender, who, unbeknown to the police at the time, was hiding in plain sight all along. Welcome to my channel, a safe place where we can dive into the strange and mysterious, true crime, makeup, and chill, with new videos every Sunday.
Warning: viewer discretion is advised.
Hi, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, I am Tana the makeup artist, and I do my makeup while I tell you about strange and mysterious true crime cases. The last two episodes, which I'll tag right here, are based in my home state of South Australia. Please help me out at any time throughout this video by tapping the thumbs up. Just fills me with confidence that the stories that I'm working really hard on every week are what you want to see. As always, the products I use will be in the description below. Now, this story takes place in the small town of Kapunda, which is known for its copper mining that began back in 1942. The kids in the neighborhood will tell you that there's not a lot to do there. It's known to be quiet and peaceful and just a sleepy town, where everyone knows one another. The population is just shy of 3,000 people, so not huge. The closest nearby city to Kapunda is Adelaide. The 8th of November 2010 was a Monday, and what do people do on a Monday? They go to school and work, just normal weekday stuff. But by 11 a.m., a neighbor worried about not seeing the Roes decided to check in on them. The Rowe family were made up of 4 members. There was Andrew, who was 45, Rose, who was 50, Chantel, 16, and Christopher, 23. Andrew and Rose were pillars of the community. What? Andrew and Rose were pillars of the Kapunda community. They had moved to Kapunda from Adelaide in the mid-2000s. Their home on Harriet Street that they were living in was a rental property, and in this home they settled and lived happy and peaceful lives. Andrew had migrated from England when he was only 2 years old. He was known as a great bloke who loved to have a laugh, He was a hard worker and he owned his own carpet cleaning business. Andrew met Rose through her brother, and the couple fell in love and married in the 1980s. In 1987, their son Christopher was born, and then in 1994, they were blessed with the birth of their daughter Chantel. Christopher had moved out of home in 2010, but he was still very close with them. He only moved a short distance from the family home to live with his fiancée. There was only a 7-year age gap between Chantel and Christopher, and she would often tag along with him. Chantel was a popular girl in high school. She was known as a social butterfly. She had lots of friends. Her auntie would say that she would always stick up for anyone who got bullied in school, which is so good. She, was just a sweet girl. She played netball, which her parents would attend her games every weekend at South Gawler Netball Club. They were just the picture perfect family. And never in a million years did anyone suspect that this family would ever have any enemies. In October 2010, Chantel had landed herself a job working at Cafe Divine in the town of Nuriupta, a 20-minute drive from Kapunda. It was tricky for Chantel to get to her new job as she didn't yet have her license. Her parents and her brother, they had busy jobs of their own. And so to make this commute a little easier in the beginning, Chantel would stay at her friend's house, which was a little closer for her to get to work. She even listed her home address as the address of her friends on her job application. Christopher promised Chantel that he would teach her how to drive, fulfill his big brother duties. But Little did he know that promise would be stripped away from him in the worst way possible. Chantal also had a boyfriend and his name was Dylan Pratt. They spent a lot of time together and soon their friends became each other's friends. On the 6th of November, Andrew and Rose had organised a trip to Adelaide for the night. Chantal organised for a few close friends to come over and keep her company. And like, it wasn't a party or anything like that. It was just friends hanging out and spending time together, watching movies and stuff. Instead of going home, some of her friends decided to stay the night. The next morning, Andrew and Rose, they returned home from Adelaide and they noticed that some of Chantal's friends, well, they were still there. Now, most parents would be like, get these little a-holes out of my home, but not these two. They put on a lunch spread for everyone, you know, fired up the barbecue, put a couple of snags on, and then just enjoyed some quality time with Chantal and her friends. Later that afternoon, Chantal, she began to feel sick and was showing signs of coming down with a cold. She decided to head to bed and just have an early night. Before going to bed, she contacted her manager via text message, notifying him that, you know, she wasn't well, she wasn't feeling great, and it was probably best that she just didn't come in for her next shift, which was the next day. The next day, on the morning of November 8th, 2010, it just started like any other day in Kapunda. But by the afternoon, the town would be forever changed. As the neighbor approached the row home, something just felt off. You know that feeling where you just like, it's that gut feeling we talk about all the time in the comments, you know? Yeah, ugh, horrible thing, but there to protect you. Listen to it. Anyway, something felt off to the neighbor. And, you know, they're used to seeing this house. It's bustling. People are walking in and out, going to school. Like, the row home is always busy. On this day, it stood oddly still. Some of the curtains were still drawn, and when knocks went unanswered, they decided to peer through a window. What they saw inside made their blood run cold, and then they contacted the police. The town of Kapunda only had 2 working police officers, and before this day, the town had no other major crimes committed. So this was huge. One officer arrived at the scene, and as he entered the house, the full extent of the horror became clear. The blood spatter throughout the house told a chilling story of desperate struggles and failed attempts to escape. The police officer called for an ambulance, which arrived shortly afterwards. The officers of Kapunda realized the magnitude of the crime, and this was way over their heads. So they called in the experts, the Major Crime Task Force. Detective John Keane, who arrived at the scene to assist the officers, described it as looking like a slaughterhouse. In the kitchen, they found Andrew and Rose, while Chantal was discovered separate from her parents in her bedroom. All 3 had been stabbed multiple times in what appeared to be a frenzied attack. It was evident that the killer, whoever it was, had tried to clean up after the attack, but because there was so much blood, they had given up. Even stranger, the killer had left in his socks, leaving the scene, and his shoes behind. The police quickly ruled out robbery as a motive, noticing that all the family's valuable items, like computers, cameras, and cell phones, they were left untouched. This was not a random break-in gone wrong. No. But where was Christopher? Well, he was away on a much-needed holiday in Queensland, completely unaware of what was happening back home. As he was scrolling through his social media, he saw a post about the triple murder that happened on his parents' street in Kapunda. Concerned, Christopher reached out to his friends back home, asking them to please check on his family. He was terrified. You know, the fact that his parents and sister weren't answering his calls and his text messages was the first sign that something just wasn't right. One of Christopher's friends responded, reassuring him that, they were all okay. This friend meant well, but he got the Rowe family's house number wrong, so the people that he had seen on the premises walking around was for the wrong street number. Another friend confirming the worst had happened to Christopher's family and that all three had in fact been killed. Think of that for a minute. Like, you're on holiday and then you're learning through social media that your entire family has been brutally murdered. As soon as the death of his family was confirmed, Christopher, he jumped on the next available flight and he headed straight back to Kapunda. As Christopher struggled with this unimaginable news, the police were working tirelessly to solve the case. But in order to eliminate Christopher from being on their list of suspects, they had to interview him. They had to, protocol. So Christopher, he agreed to speak with them and he was quickly ruled out. But this fact likely brought him little comfort. As news of Christopher's situation spread, the people of Kapunda, they rallied around him. This is just so sad, isn't it? Like, so sad. The town was in shock. People were locking their doors and just side-eyeing everyone, The fact that the murderer hadn't been captured meant a lot of sleepless nights for the entire community. Chantel's school also did what it could for all of her friends that were mourning her death. Now, in a town where everyone knows everyone, rumors spread fast. Some people started whispering about drugs or gangs. After all, Andrew owned a motorbike, right? Maybe he got mixed up with the wrong crowd. The police quickly shot down these theories. Andrew was just a regular guy who happened to like motorcycles. It was his hobby, something he enjoyed doing on his own. He enjoyed going for rides on the open country roads around Kapunda. Besides loving the freedom his bike gave him, he had no links to any outlaw bikie clubs, and this theory, it was out. Another theory was that Chantel was pregnant and this was enough motive for someone to want to have her killed. Medical examiners later confirmed this to be a false accusation. Sadly, some newspapers even stated this fact as true before finding out the truth, and they had it published. As the police investigation continued, the police faced a daunting task. They had to interview basically the entire town. Neighbors, friends, anyone who might have seen or heard something unusual that night. One neighbor reported hearing a woman scream for help 3 times around 1 a.m. The medical examiner confirming the estimated time of deaths to be around 1 a.m. Andrew had a total of 29 stab wounds and Rose had 50. The tip of the knife was found lodged in Andrew's skull and some more of the knife was found in Rose's skull tissue. The angle of the stab wounds found on Rose's back showed she was attempting to crawl away on her hands and knees while he continued to attack her. Chantel was stabbed 33 times and sadly, she was also sexually assaulted. The police, they couldn't confirm if this assault happened while she was still alive or if it happened after she had passed away. Out of respect for Chantel's family, the officers didn't make the sexual assault public at this time. They did, however, plead to the public to come forward and report anyone who may be just acting suspicious or just a little off. They got lucky and someone phoned Crime Stoppers, someone who had been scrolling through their social media and had friends in common with Chantel. They noticed this weird Facebook post. The post read, "I've done something really bad. I'm really sorry. I don't know how I'm going to live with myself." This person lived close to the Rowe family. Police, they weren't leaving anything to chance, and they called in the owner of the Facebook page to come in for an interview. The person agreed to come in and speak with the officers. When he arrived at the station, he was confused but, remained calm, insisting that he barely knew Chantel and the Rowe family. He denied any involvement in the triple murder, and when police questioned him about his unusual Facebook posts, he explained that he was referring to a domestic dispute. The police, they dug deeper and found what the person in question was saying was in fact true. He had no connections or motive that could tie him to the Rowe family, and this lucky lead wasn't so lucky after all. The investigators looked into Chantel's boyfriend Dylan, who had sent a text message to Chantel at around 5:30 a.m. on the morning of the murders. The message was asking her if she was feeling any better, as he knew that she was going to bed early because she was feeling sick. But Chantel never responded. However, it was later discovered that she indeed did respond, but due to not having any credit on her prepaid mobile, the text never actually sent. This was concerning. Could this have been Chantel if her estimated time of death was around 1 a.m.? During the police investigation, they discovered that Chantel and her boyfriend's relationship was extremely healthy. They trusted one another, and her parents seemed to like Dylan. He was forthcoming and willing to help police with their investigation in any way that he possibly could. Dylan informed the detectives about the movie night with friends that Chantel hosted the night before her death. He even gave the investigators a list of people's names that were there that night. The information given by Dylan turned investigators' attention to the names on the list. All the people on the list were cooperative. Investigators went through their phones and their social media accounts, just looking for any clues or hints of tension within the group. In the chaos of that violent night, the killer left behind crucial evidence. Located on the back of Chantel's bedroom door was a fingerprint, but without any suspect to match it to, the fingerprint was virtually useless at this point of the investigation. Medical examiners also discovering DNA from semen found at the scene. The DNA was confirmed to be not from her boyfriend Dylan or anyone else in the police database. This is where things get interesting. The investigators, they start to narrow their focus. They weren't looking at just a random stranger anymore. No, their attention turned to someone much closer to home, someone who knew the Rowes, especially Chantel. The police requested that Chantel's male friends give fingerprint and DNA samples. Without hesitation, they agreed, and slowly, one by one, they were crossed off the suspects list. One of Chantel's friends stood out to officers. Now, I'm not saying he was guilty, not yet anyway, but something about him caught the investigators' attention. During an interview, this male friend provided an alibi for himself, like voluntarily, without being asked, and randomly complained that he didn't have a girlfriend. Weird, right? Like, why would you be so forthcoming with that kind of information unless you were really trying to sell that you were innocent? Strange behavior. He didn't stop there. He also expressed his feelings about not being invited to Chantel's house on the Saturday night, the day before the murders. To me, that screams motive. It was enough to make the police take a closer look. When it was time for officers to take his fingerprints, just like they did with everyone else, they noticed that he had wounds all over his hands that could have been consistent with somebody holding a knife. With over 100 stab wounds between all three of the family members, it would have almost been impossible for the murderer to not have cut themselves during the attack. The fingerprints and the DNA sample came back as a positive match to 18-year-old Jason Alexander Downey. Since he was just so good at giving information away, how was Jason going to try and explain this? The officers knew that they had to arrest him due to the fact that he lived with his family. The officers, they didn't want to risk a confrontation that could lead to anyone else getting hurt. They also didn't want to risk arresting him at work and him fleeing before they could detain him. Officers were smart and they rang the automotive workshop where Downey worked and requested that his boss bring Downey in to sign a police statement. The plan worked. It did. It was a smart plan and it worked. As soon as they arrived at the police station, Jason Downey was arrested. Regardless of any evidence that pointed in his direction, Downey swore that he had nothing to do with the murders and that he didn't really even know Chantel and her parents. But as police would soon discover, behind Downey's seemingly normal exterior lurked an obsession that had been growing for years and a fixation that would ultimately lead to tragedy. It all started with Chantel Rowe. She was kind to Downey when most people weren't. Many people describing him as weird or strange, but Downey saw something more in those friendly interactions. He misinterpreted her kindness as interest, and that's when things took a dangerous turn. After a conversation with his mother, who begged him to tell her the truth, Downey admitted to his mother that he did know Chantel very well. He told his mother that he would walk Chantel home from school every day, and he had actually been to her house on Harriet Street as many as 40 or 50 times. But to explain the DNA, he told his mother that he had consensual intercourse with her the night before the murders. With all the evidence now backing him into a corner where nothing he could say could explain away any of his wrongdoings, investigators got Downey to crack and admit to all 3 murders. They did their job so well that he even cooperated with the officers, showing them the location in which he disposed of the clothing that he had worn the night of the murders and the dumping location of the murder weapons. The officers headed to the location that Downey had given to search for the items. They found his clothing and socks, but they were unsuccessful in retrieving the weapon. Downey insisting that someone must have taken it, but police believed Downey was lying about the location of the weapons. Till this day, the weapons have never been found. The news that the Kapunda triple murderer had been arrested shook the little town. I mean, it was hard to believe that the scrawny 18-year-old apprentice mechanic could be responsible for such a disgusting act of violence. Who was Downey, and how did he come to know the Rowe family? Downey weighed only 52 kilos or 114 pounds, far from what investigators' initial assumption was. They weren't looking for anyone 52 kilos, let's just say that much. Because of the brutality and then the strength shown in the attacks towards each member of the family, the police believed that they were looking for a really strong, large male, or the possibility that there had been 2 perpetrators. Downey had no criminal record, no history of violence or drug abuse. He did have a tense relationship with his mother, but regardless, he did appear to love her and was very close with the rest of his family. Jason Downey was a high school friend of Chantel's boyfriend Dylan. He had moved to the town of Kapunda from Scotland. He had moved to the town of Kapunda from Scotland with his mother Lorna and brother Jamie in 2006 when he was 14 years old. His birth certificate didn't list who his father was, and up until the time his mother remarried, he didn't really have a male figure in his life. As we know from his initial interview with investigators, Jason was very much an oversharer and took to Facebook to voice his feelings and his emotions. One post saying, "Love my family in Scotland. Haven't seen them in 6 years. And I also grew up without a dad since I was 2 months old. So I have been raised up by my mum all my life. And I respect and love her to death, even though we have our bad moments." Love her to death? Scary to think that his words could have been literal if she were ever to do something that truly upset him. His Facebook post also made it very clear that he hated Kapunda, calling it Crapunda in several posts. Downey also painting himself as the cool guy, with profile pictures that people who knew him described as the cool sunglasses guy. He would boast about how he was an athletic guy on and off the basketball court, adding, "if you know what I mean." Ew. No, we don't know what you mean, you little freak. His Facebook relationship status read that he was in a relationship, but in reality, this boy's girlfriend must have been Casper the ghost because no one had ever seen her. The truth was something much darker. He had been obsessed with his friend's girlfriend all along. Remember how I said that Jason Downey was high school friends with Chantel's boyfriend Dylan? Well, he would tag along wherever they went, always the third wheel. Let's just say that it wasn't a secret either, that Downey had this obsession with Chantel. Dylan, he knew about it. He just laughed it off, you know? Everyone knew he was just weird like that, but didn't think he would be capable of murder because of it. Dylan also felt confident that his and Chantel's relationship was strong and she would never cheat on him. Downey didn't have many friends and Dylan just took him under his wing. Same with Chantel, but this obviously sent mixed signals to Downey, and little did Dylan know his friend's obsession with his girlfriend grew more intense with every passing day. Police found evidence that Downey took his obsession to the extreme, finding Facebook messages to Chantel pestering her online. Soon, Downey began following Chantel, driving by her house repeatedly, watching her walk home from school. As time went on and being shut down by Chantel, who put him in the friend zone, Downey's obsession and resentment towards her only grew stronger. He made the decision to break into the Rowe family home, probably thinking he could force Chantel to be with him, or if he couldn't have Chantel, then no one could. Dylan and Downey had spoken to each other the night of the murders, Downey sussing out if Dylan was with Chantel that night. Dylan had told Downey that Chantel was coming down with a cold and decided to head to bed early, and she wasn't going to work the next day. This meant that Downey had lied to the police. He told officers in his interview that he had gone to the Rowe home that night to see Dylan. Dylan denied this to be true and told officers that Downey knew very well that Chantel was alone that night. He was lying, and what happens to liars? They eventually get caught. Night of November 7th, 2010, as the Rowe family was winding down, Chantel's friends had left, and Andrew and Rosemary were probably looking forward to a quiet evening, unexpecting of the mayhem that was about to occur in their normally peaceful, untroubled home. Jason Downey had been planning this for a while. His obsession with Chantel had reached a breaking point. He couldn't stand seeing her with other people, living her life without him. In his twisted mind, this was his chance to finally make Chantel his. How this massacre played out that fateful night is something only Downey would truly know. When he arrived at work the next morning, his work colleagues asked him how he sustained the injuries on his hands. He explained to them that he had fallen off his bike the day before. Exactly what he told officers when they asked him. However, he was sloppy with his lies, and it was inconsistent with what he had told his friends. He had told them that he had injured his hands while he was at work. Later that day, when the news went viral about the triple murders in their town, Downey asked to take the remainder of the day off, as hearing of the passing of his friend Chantel, he was too distraught to work. Ugh. Police looked further into Downey's background and found that not many people were too fond of him. His basketball teammates saying that their friendship was partially because the town was small and he just didn't have many friends, and then they just felt sorry for the bloke. The same goes for his co-workers at the mechanic shop, each person stating that he was just a little weird and awkward. His lies were quickly falling apart. when police also discovered that Downey had only ever been to the row house once with Dylan, not all the other times that he had admitted to his mother, unless of course he was talking about the times that he had been stalking the property. What's even more disturbing is after the murders, he'd gone to Dylan's house to pay his respects and shed a tear for the family that he so easily tore apart. Also, 5 days after the murders, the community began laying flowers and tributes at the row home, and footage was taken by a local news station of the mourners all placing down their tributes, right? Can you guess who was right there in amongst it all? Yep, Downey. As the cameras panned, you could see Downey also laying a tribute for the family, pretending to be all sad that Chantel and her parents had been killed by a vicious murderer, knowing very well that he was the one who had done it. Chilling, isn't it? With Downey now off the streets and in police custody, he was held in remand, which is where someone is locked up until they've been sentenced. So they aren't yet guilty of the crime, but they haven't been proven innocent yet either. I guess you could call it like a state of limbo. Remember how he admitted to the killings? Now in custody, he changed his plea to not guilty, meaning that the investigators had to build a strong case against him. But here's the thing, DNA and evidence doesn't lie. The clothing that they recovered from the location given by Downey were drenched in all three victims' blood. His shoes that were located at the scene matched the prints found behind the curtain in the bathroom. But this is where things get really weird. In a letter to his mother Lorna, he explained that he wasn't guilty and it was a man dressed in dark clothing holding a green rubbish bag that had actually committed the crime. He just happened to stumble on into the home after the attack had already occurred. This is where the letter gets stranger. He said, quote, "I saw Chantel's feet under the bed. She was alive. I put her in bed. She had cuts everywhere. She said help, and she died in my arms. I fucked up, Mom. I'm sorry. I should have just rung the police." From one mother to another, Lorna, I just pray she didn't believe his lies. I pray. I know you always want to see the best in your child, but that is, I'm going to say it, bullshit. While the officers gathered the last of their evidence to further seal the deal and have Downey locked up where he belongs, investigators found a digital camera on the kitchen bench. When they went through the pictures, they made a shocking revelation. The photos consisted of everyone who attended the barbecue that Sunday afternoon, the day of the murders. When they looked a little closer, they noticed in a photo taken with Chantel and her friends that she was wearing a lanyard. I know what you're thinking, yeah, well, what of it? It's just a lanyard. Well, attached to the lanyard was a USB, and officers found it in Downey's bedroom at his mother's house. Downey had detached the USB from the lanyard and it was sitting inside his car. Blood was also found on the dashboard of his car, which tested to be that of Andrew and Rose's. In April 2012, Downey finally faced the consequences of his actions. He stood in court, surrounded by the grief and anger of the entire community. The charges against him were read out. 3 counts of murder. But Downey had one last trick up his sleeve, which stunned everyone. He changed his not guilty plea back to guilty. Was this because he didn't want to sit a trial? Or was he pleading guilty because of remorse for what he had done? What police heard in a recorded jail conversation with Downey's brother Jason explained the last-minute guilty plea. It was strategic and not at all a sign of remorse. He was recorded saying, "Fuck, if I had pled not guilty and I am found guilty, which my lawyer says would happen, I would never be released." The sentence was handed down life imprisonment with a minimum of 35 years before being eligible for parole. 35 years. It's a long time, isn't it? But is it enough for taking 3 innocent lives? But here's the thing that really gets me. While Downey serves his time, the Rowe family is gone forever. Christopher Rowe will never see his parents or sister again. He can't talk to them on the phone whenever he wanted like Downey can. Police believe that they had enough evidence to tell of the events that occurred the night of the murders. On November 7th, 2010, Jason and his mother Lorna got into a heated argument, ending in Lorna asking Jason to leave. Jason got in his car and he drove around for a while. At around 11 p.m, he stood outside of the Rowe family home, stalking Chantel as he had been for months leading up to the attack. But this time was different. He wasn't going to just sit out in his car watching the house like he normally did. No. He made his way to the back of the property where he gained access through the bathroom window. Beneath the window was the bathtub where he hid in case anyone was to walk in. The thought of anyone doing this terrifies me. Oof. He waited there until he was certain that no one was awake and the house sat in silence. He headed to the kitchen quietly, being careful not to wake anyone up. Police believe that the knife that Downey had used that night was consistent with the knives found in the Rowe home. His first victim was Chantel, who woke terrified about seeing Jason Downey standing over her in her bedroom. This startled her parents, who rushed to protect their daughter. Based on witness statements who heard Rose screaming for help 3 times, followed by Andrew screaming and a thump like someone had hit the floor, the time was now around 1 a.m. Believed to be unarmed, they fought together against Downey, trying to disarm him. But Downey was in a rage that couldn't be contained. Between Andrew and Rose, Downey inflicted 89 stab wounds, some even while they crawled on their hands and knees trying to escape. Downey wasn't going to stop his attack until they were dead. After Chantel's parents were no longer a problem, Downey turned his attention back towards Chantel and re-entered her bedroom. He found her hiding, terrified for her life after being forced to listen to her own parents fighting for their lives, trying to protect her. She was underneath her bed where he dragged her out, sexually assaulted her, and stabbed her a few more times. What's creepy is that once he had finished with Chantel and she had passed away, this evil monster undressed Chantel and redressed her in clean clothing. Once all 3 family members were deceased, he panicked and tried cleaning up the mess. He mopped around Andrew and Rose's body, examiners reporting that even after the members of the family were dead, he continued to stab them. The amount of blood was overwhelming, and Downey soon gave up. He remained inside the home until early hours of the morning. This is known because around 5:30 a.m, Chantel's phone received a message from Dylan, who was checking in on her and hoping she was feeling better. Downey tried to respond to Dylan's message to give off the illusion that Chantel was alive and well. However, the message didn't go through because she had no phone credit. Blood was found smeared on the keyboard of Chantel's laptop as he attempted to log into her computer. He grabbed the USB lanyard and he fled the property. It's safe to say that these details would have been hard for Christopher to process. He was already going through enough. Ugh, so sad. All because this stupid Downey guy couldn't get his own girlfriend. What a loser. The Rowe family murders left a deep scar on Kapunda. Christopher Rowe's loss is unimaginable. In an instant, his whole world was shattered. It's the kind of pain that never really goes away. But from this tragedy, something unexpected emerged. The people of Kapunda came together like never before. They rallied around Christopher, offering support in any way they could. Neighbours became family, strangers became friends. The town learned that even in the darkest of times, there's strength in unity. In 2013, Christopher Rowe found happiness again, announcing that his fiancée was pregnant and he was going to be a proud boy dad, just shy of the 3rd anniversary of his family's murders, saying, "I can't wait. After everything that has happened, I want to be the best dad that I can be." Wow, what a wild story, right? Such a loser. Like, I don't get it. As always, thank you so much for watching. I hope you like this week's look. All the products I use are in the description below. But if you really like this video and you haven't already, please don't forget to hit the like button. And if you really, really liked it, maybe you can hit subscribe so we can hang out again. Well, that's all from me. Until next Sunday, have a safe and happy week. And remember, you take care out on those streets, girl.
Oh, hey sis. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. If you want to keep hanging out, we can. All you have to do is tap this true crime and makeup playlist. Or if you want some makeup tips and hear about the world's dumbest criminals, you can tap on this one here. Love ya.